This is my completely modular stacking kitchen on wheels, and I built it to prototype test ModStac. ModStac is something I built to tackle that feeling of nothing is ever finished. I always want to upgrade something, and I'd like that capacity, but in the meantime, it would be great if everything looks like it's finished, right? Now, this build actually started about 6 months ago. At that time, I had just hit clinical burnout. I was not doing too good. So I didn't come up with the most interesting design. I was just making modules that were on wheels and we could place the drill press on there and that kind of stuff. And then just last week, I was kind of reflecting on the things that we've been doing on the channel and the things that I've been building. And I was like, I just don't like the things that I'm building anymore. It just doesn't seem like I'm innovating in any regard. But then the very next morning, I looked at the drill press, which was still standing on the floor after 6 months. And this idea came to me where I was like, why not make it stacking so we can also move the drill press to a different location if it turns out that that location is not the most ideal, right? Now, some of those earlier prototypes just weren't really working out for me. I just didn't really like the design until I actually went to the hardware store and I bought myself some L brackets. And I wanted to place the L brackets on the outside of the build to somewhat showcase them. When I started from scratch and just designed everything out of hand, it somehow came together really quite nice. Ditched the L brackets and just gave it some teeth to glue it all together, but we had a uniform stacking solution that we could also place in any orientation. And I then made the expansions. So the first module was 15 centimeters high, the second module 30, the third module 60, and so on and so forth. At least for me, the laser cutter I have on hand is 80 by 80 centimeters, so we'll keep it at 60 by 60 for the max module size. So last week we ended up with this design, which was primarily a workshop-based system, and the teeth length was a little bit long, so I did adjust that later on in the design process. But I figured that the most interesting use case for ModStac isn't the workshop-based solution at all. It's actually much more broad than that. And so I do get quite a few comments asking me about the wheel situation, as in why the fuck is everything on wheels? So the first thing we'll be laser cutting here is the base, and I envisioned this somewhat as a gridfinity system. So you would have multiple bases connected to each other, and if you wanted to upgrade the system, you just add another one and stack the modules essentially. So I tested it with multiple different types of materials like particle board, melamine, OSB, and of course multiplex. Multiplex is the best one for this system because it's incredibly strong. So I'm using 12mm thick material, as that's the material that most laser cutters in this category could cut. Like 60-watt modules can cut this as well if you do multiple passes. And this was actually the first project where I didn't have any fuck-ups in terms of me setting the laser speed wrong or the laser power wrong, and everything just came off really nicely and cleanly, so that was pretty great. Always try to make sure to put a coat of lacquer on there just in case there's any spills or any unforeseen circumstances which could stain the wood. I always really enjoy when the build actually gets started, everything starts to come together, especially during that burnout period where I had very physical symptoms. It felt more like an illness than anything mental. But I noticed that as soon as I started building something, my body would also just calm down and I wouldn't have any cramps or pain in my heart and that kind of stuff. It was pretty amazing actually. And this is where we ran into the first issues with the first prototype as well. So the laser cutter isn't as accurate as I thought, and there is a little bit of variance in between cuts. What I did is I added a 2mm extra gap between the connecting pieces over here for the next layer, which will stack on top over here. You can see there's a little bit of room between it, and that really helps everything sink into place. But it doesn't mean that it will be misaligned all of the time, because of course we have the teeth on both ends, right? Something I wanted to prevent on this build is that mistake we made on the compute box build, where initially I just stacked the laser cut components on top of each other, and that didn't really look too good until I put some spacer hooks in between. Now that method for connecting things is also a big issue, because if you want to add another stack on the side over here, you would have to unstack this entire layer, right? So I did prototype a new method for connecting these, where you can basically connect them from the outside with a little hook that I also laser cut. You press it into place. I wanted it to twist into place as well, but that didn't really work out. But if you have any better suggestions for that, then definitely let me know as well. I've never actually owned an oven before, and it seems also somewhat impractical if you move to different apartments. I'm a renter, and I can imagine that if I rent a new place, the kitchen is going to be different as well. That's also somewhat why I'm building the ModStac kitchen, because I can arrange the blocks in different ways to make sense for that. particular space. Now at this point I noticed the vents at the side of this inbuilt oven. Now when I realized that there were potentially a lot of things that I was missing in the design process, I came up with the idea to use 3D printed inserts again. One of the issues I have with 3D printed inserts on all of my other setups though, is that when they're not full, it looks really bad, right? It looks like it's an unfinished project, even though it is functional and it is somewhat finished. So this time around, I kept the laser cut inside bits and essentially called it a feature by painting them yellow. In last week's video, the overall consensus was very positive on this whole idea of ModStac. They said like, IKEA is going to steal this and that kind of stuff. I think with 3D printed inserts, it's basically become unstealable. I mean, you never know. I'd love to see IKEA make a 3D printer to accommodate their products, but I don't know if we'll ever see that. I actually thought I made a slight mistake with these teeth over here, but it turned out as I put the oven back in place that I didn't really need to saw those off. To hold those panels in place, I 3D printed these tiny little hooks which you screw in, and that's okay, but it also takes quite a lot of time, so perhaps in the next version we'll just make things with little sticks in there and you can press them into place. Another reason I don't think anybody would steal this for commercial purposes is because of the economic state of things. Like, this thing is so overbuilt, it just wouldn't be sellable if it wasn't a DIY project. I was so happy to see those yellow colours on this build. I've never actually used a whole lot of colour in my build projects, and we definitely should. We should just go to the store, buy a bunch of different coloured paints and make sure that every build from now on has a joyful aesthetic to it. The next module is a little less efficient in terms of material use, of course, but this is simply a drawer slide, and I personally don't really like drawer slides, but I wanted to test if we could cut this in a single go. So we cut the front of the drawer and the outside bit in one pass, and then see if it could shove into place like that. In the first iteration, I actually had these wooden connector pieces, which would also act as a table. On this module though, we're using the 3D printed components. I tried to make these as efficient as possible, but I could optimize the design a little bit more. This will just screw into place, and it's 3D printed in PLA reinforced with carbon fiber, so it's incredibly strong. Something else that's incredibly strong are these sheet metal fabricated parts that I just got from today's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay offers manufacturing services ranging from PCB production and assembly, CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, injection molding, and of course also 3D printing. And it is incredibly simple. You just upload a file, you get an instant quote for what something's going to cost, and then you send it off to them. A couple of days later it arrives in your mailbox. Now these are actually for a future project, and I'm curious if you can guess what they're for. I think I might have overdone it with the thickness of these, but it's going to be a fun one. Special thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring the video, and I left the link down below. I was expecting there to be some amount of instability, especially in the larger unit, which is the 60x60 one with the oven in there, but it was all very solid, like it just didn't move. Now pretty much all of the hardware for this first prototype was actually 3D printed in carbon fiber reinforced PLA, even the handle for the drawer slide as well, so that one is incredibly strong actually, but it does require some iteration to make that like a normal handle instead of bolts sticking out the back over there. Now we also have some of these corner pieces and center pieces for top units, and these will make the entire work surface flat. I never really lost a passion for making the videos or building things on the channel, but for some reason I don't enjoy being a content creator. I enjoy making things and making videos, but the whole content creation aspect of it sometimes doesn't really work for me. This next unit is nothing fancy, it's just a cabinet, and it doesn't have the 3D printed inserts on there because this is one of the first iterations alongside the drawer slide that I put together. And in the future I would like to put 3D printed inserts on that so we can input tech and do all kinds of funky stuff with it. One of the things that this kitchen is actually missing is some kind of unit to suck away all of the fumes from the cooktop, and we could, for example, put a fan in one of these units and place it a little bit above the cooktop. One of the most absurd things about making videos and posting them on YouTube is the incredible amount of opportunity that comes your way. And I don't mean this in a braggy way, but pretty much every day you get emails from brands, and it all has so much potential. For this particular project, I actually ended up shutting off my email for the past 2 weeks, and then I came up with some really great ideas. This cabinet door actually still needs something to land on so it doesn't close inwards. And that actually gave me an idea for a future project where we could perhaps laser cut these components out of thinner wood, but then double them up so we could glue them together. And this inside layer would have a little bit thicker of a rim, so the door would just close onto that. I think there's always a lot more nuance to things, like everybody experiences this, right? You do a certain thing, but you're not doing that certain thing for the outcome or what it's described as being. You do it because you enjoy that specific aspect of it, and somehow things land into place, but it's also different from what other people think you are. This is a home battery unit that we checked out a little while ago, and it allows us to solve the peak load problem for the kitchen on wheels essentially. So we have two peak performers, right? The oven and the cooktop. When those are on both at the same time, it exceeds the power limit of my home batteries. That means it's going to be pulling from the grid instead of the solar storage. And this is one of those units which you will see an upgrade for in the next episode, where we can have power plugs mounted on the side over here, for example, so external appliances can be connected to it, and perhaps even like a meter to see how much we're actually consuming, that kind of stuff. So that's why we have the 3D printed inserts on here, right? Because we can actually upgrade it with really awesome stuff, but we can also de-upgrade it. Like we could turn it into something different. De-upgrade it? Or how do you say that? Downgrade it. I guess what I'm trying to say is that attention can be scattered by opportunity, and sometimes it's really good to dive deep on a project and exclude all else. One of the reasons I'm using different coloured 3D printed components for the second module is because you're cooking with other people, and eventually you kind of have to explain where stuff is, right? Nobody really knows each other's kitchens, so you could just say the green module or the one with the red handle, that kind of stuff. I think it's really important to break that rhythm every once in a while as well. Instead of it just being a stack of blocks, we have a little bit more depth on this one, and in that way it feels less like a big obelisk in the room, right? I think these are what people call Brooklyn pipes, not entirely sure. They look really cool and they're actually really nice to work with as well, relatively cheap. So what is this video even about, dude? It's about Burnout? It might be about Burnout. Burnout sucks. This is something I really like about ModStac as well. I initially designed it around the sheets of multiplex or plywood that I could buy in the hardware store, which have standard dimensions of 60 by 120 centimeters. Where the fuck are you going? And the appliances that we're integrating into these are also standardized to a certain extent, so they all fit within the ModStac system. Just a quick reminder here as well that if you've made it this far into the video, you must enjoy it or you must have fell asleep. It's 50-50 really. But anyway, if you do, then consider subscribing, and that way you don't miss the future episode. Both the ModStac base system and the kitchen on wheels is available on my website and on my Patreon. That helps support the channel. All of the potential proceeds for that actually go back into the channel, allowing me to continue making these videos. So yeah, that was the first prototype of ModStac, kitchen on wheels, and some of it is really good, some of it is really not that good. Like this drawer slide over here does not open when it's warmer than, I don't know, 27 degrees. It expands and we can't actually do anything with it, so we're gonna have to upgrade that in the next episode. Still need to do all of the wiring connected to the battery unit and that kind of stuff.